Rakshasa is the new for 2025 B&M Dive Coaster that debuted at Six Flags Great America. The ride is located right next to Demon, pretty much in the center of the park. Built by popular manufacturer Bolliger & Mabillard, this is one of their signature dive coaster models, meaning that once you ascend that lift, you're going to stop on the drop and just stare down for a few seconds before you actually go over the edge. Rakshasa stands at a height of 180 feet with a 170-foot, 96-degree drop and 5 inversions. Rakshasa was actually advertised as a record-setting dive coaster because it takes the record for steepest drop and most inversions on a dive coaster. If that record sounds kind of made up, it is technically record-setting. There are coasters out there, though, by other manufacturers that essentially do the same thing that have absolutely shattered those numbers, but technically, Rakshasa does hold those records for a B&M Dive model specifically. Rakshasa, as the name would suggest, is themed to a Rakshasa, which was a being commonly associated with supernatural powers, and those are usually used for evil. The theme of this ride is definitely interesting, and I think the consensus is, or at least at first, was that nobody knew how to pronounce the name. Like seriously, when the coaster was first announced, I heard all kinds of different ways to say the name. People would say Wrath of Rakshasa, Wrath of Rakshasa, Wrath of Rebecca. I'm serious there, that's one I heard. It feels like people now have either figured out how to pronounce the name or they just call it Wrath or the Dive Coaster, which is fine. Honestly though, I'm just glad it wasn't another DC themed ride. Nothing wrong with DC, of course, but if you've ever been to Six Flags Great America, you know that they have plenty of DC themed things already. The queue also has some really good theming as well, and the entrance sign looks really cool. Before you board the train, you're going to be greeted by an attendant who will direct you to put all of your loose articles into a bin system. These bins are on a conveyor that travels across the station and over the station so that when you get off of the ride, the bin has been moved to the exit. This is actually a really cool system. Yukon Striker up at Canada's Wonderland also has that same system. Rakshasa does not have metal detectors, but I do highly suggest taking full advantage of those bins, especially if you don't have zipper pockets. If you're worried about loose articles getting stolen, especially like phones, keys, wallets, the bin system makes it almost impossible because the bins won't actually make it across the station and to the unloading platform until your train does. So whatever train has guests getting off in front of you, it'll be their bins at the unload station, and yours will still be suspended above the actual coaster station, so you don't really have the opportunity to have your stuff stolen. Once you get dispatched, you're going to take a right-hand turn and climb that 180-foot lift hill. Unlike a lot of dive coasters where you take a 180-degree turn and turn around at the top of the lift, you're actually going to go slightly to the left and get a face-to-face view with Raging Bull and Max Force. You'll also have Demon right below you, and off to your left, you're going to have X-Flight, which is a really cool visual for all those coasters if you time it right, and they have trains either going over the lifts or going on part of the course. The signature element, of course, is the drop, which holds you for 3 to 4 seconds before you drop 171 feet into your first element, the Immelman. This is a pretty standard beginning for most B&M dives, although depending on where you sit and how the ride is running, you'll either get really good positive G-forces or some hang time, especially at the top of that element. Upon exiting the Immelman, you're going to fly past the midway into a dive loop. Again, another fairly common element that can either have really good positive forces or some hang time. You then fly over the midway again into the third element, a 0G roll. And up to this point, I would say the ride is pretty smooth regardless of where you sit, as you would expect for really any new roller coaster. This is where things start to change depending on where you sit on the train, but I'll talk about that more in a minute. The 0G roll provides a really nice floaty sensation when you're upside down especially, and from here you're going to take a downwards left-hand turn before flying up into your fourth inversion, which is a corkscrew, which in my experience offers a little bit more whip than that 0G roll. You'll then turn downwards to the left again into your final inversion, a heartline roll. To be honest, these last 3 elements can offer either a whippy experience or floating experience, but they do feel kind of repetitive. Actually, the entire second half or so of the layout does feel a little repetitive. You then turn 180 degrees to the left and then enter a 360-degree helix before hitting that brake run. And I've got to say, you hit those brakes with a good amount of speed, so the ride does hold its pacing really well. And I think the omission of a mid-course brake run really helps Rakshasa hold its speed and the pacing overall. In terms of the overall ride experience, I think it varies greatly based on where you sit. I was lucky enough actually to be given the front row, which, by the way, at least at the time I'm recording this review, they don't allow ride requests for different rows. Maybe in a couple of years they will, but they're pretty strict on that right now. That front row center seat was glossy smooth pretty much the whole ride until we got to the transition into the final helix. Whenever you pull out of that 180-degree turn and you go from turning to the left to turning to the right, it's a really quick and fun transition, but it's sort of shaky. Like, not, you don't get jolted, but you can definitely feel a noticeable kind of shake. For my second ride, I got to sit in the outside seat, but still in the front row, and I noticed the train was shaking a little bit more over the last three inversions, and all of the turns, like those little left-hand downward turns, and definitely through the helix, still wasn't a big deal considering the further you get from the middle of the train, typically the shakier it can be. I mean, look at any B&M wing coaster. My final ride was in the back row, far left, and let me tell you, it felt like a coaster that's been operating for 10 or 15 years. I know the back tends to be a little more shaky or rough on most coasters, and especially if you're sitting on the outside, but it should not have been that rattly and that shaky for a brand new coaster that was open a couple of weeks when I rode it. I think the worst part was actually that transition into the final helix, because that was so violent that I actually bashed my head into the side of the restraint, which is kind of crazy considering that it has the vest restraints which are designed to eliminate headbanging. I don't know if you've ever seen the videos of that little jolt when you enter the brake run on Iron Menace, but it felt almost identical to that transition. Like I said earlier, the ride does hold the pacing really well, and the layout is pretty fun, even if the last few inversions and elements do feel kind of repetitive. The fact that they managed to squeeze Rakshasa into the old Buccaneer battle plot of land, which is not a huge area, without taking out Demon, is very impressive. I know I say the last three elements are kind of repetitive, but how they stack so close to each other, I can't really blame them because they did squeeze quite a bit of coaster into a pretty small area. Kudos to Great America for saving Demon too, because that's one of the best aero loopers I've done, and as more and more aero loopers start to get removed, I'm glad to see this one for now is still standing. This definitely is not the best dive coaster I've done. I personally prefer the hyper dives a little bit more, but it's very good nonetheless if you can get past that shake and that roughness for a new coaster. Although this is a very good supporting coaster, I don't think this is what Great America really needed. I think Great America needed a solid standout coaster, and I think they still do. I saw a lot of people speculating before they announced Rakshasa that an RMC Raptor would have been a really good choice, and I do agree with that. But I think that still would have been a supporting coaster. If they want a true standout coaster, they should go with a Mach Striker coaster. It would be a terrific fit for the park. You can make it compact if you need, and if it was themed well, I think it could be really, really good for the park. For my final score, I give Wrath of Rakshasa a 7 out of 10. It's a good ride, don't get me wrong, but there are better rides in the park, and there are better dive coasters that are under that 200-foot mark. But don't take my word for it. Get out to Six Flags Great America, give it a few rides, do the center of it if you can, the back row, the outside seats, the inside seats. Maybe I'm just being too harsh on the rattle and the roughness. Maybe it's not that big of a deal. Just for me, it seems odd that a brand new coaster rides the way that it does. But at the end of the day, I think it's a solid supporting addition for Six Flags Great America. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave us a like and subscribe to the channel for more reviews like this. We also do a lot of vlogs, we've got some other theme park reviews coming up, a lot of good stuff coming. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys again soon.